Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nurtured by Nature podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined in conversation by the lovely Laura Sweet. Laura is an artist and writer based in California. During this inspiring episode, we dived into how her homeschooling created space for her and her children to gain a deeper reverence for nature, offered up stories around our shared love of trees, discussed some of our favourite books, and explored how Laura was inspired by Mary Reynolds' We Are the Ark to create a sanctuary for nature in her own backyard, whilst nurturing her secret addiction to buying plants. Well, thank you, Laura, for joining us today. Should we just kick off with you just telling us a little bit about yourself and maybe how nature has been a part of your story through your life?
Thank you. I live in and was born in California. And when I was very small, we moved to Canada for a little while, and then back to California again. And I spent some time in Nevada, which is where my husband's from, about 7 years there, all the while for as long as I can remember, being outside, and particularly my connection with animals and fruit trees, all trees, but fruit trees because I used to climb them and sit in them and eat the fruit in them. I feel like that was almost like church to me.
Wow, okay.
That was where my spirit got taken care of. If I felt too busy with school things or people things or big brother things or little brother things, or the family stuff that we have, that was my sanctuary. I could go be with my cats, and they were usually stray cats that I would friend. So being able to sort of talk to the animals has always been there. And as most children, we all draw pictures, and animals were almost always my subject. Flowers and trees as well, but just the outdoors. So it's just very much home. And maybe even we call Earth our mother because she provides all that. And I think that was definitely my connection. It was nurturing, it was safe, it was beautiful.
Yeah. And you quite identify with the mother energy, don't you, as yourself? And so do you think that, I guess, being inspired by that feeling that you had from Mother Earth in how you've carried that through your life?
Yeah, I definitely feel that informed the mother that I became, and how I wanted to parent. I remember being really young and loving animal programs, about wildlife, and just wanted to go to Africa so bad.
I was exactly the same.
Born Free is one of those amazing movies, and later the films about Diane Fossey, or anything with Jane Goodall, and all of those things said a lot to me. I remember being 9 in school, and they showed a film for consciousness about, for being aware of, at the time it was harp seals. So it was an incredibly brutal film to be showing young children, but I thought it was also very important. So that's a really big, strong feeling for a little person to come up with. And so the minute that I could write a check, I started sending money to Greenpeace or World Wildlife Fund on a daily basis. Those things were always important to me, and caring for it. So to me, part of being a parent and bringing children was to make sure that they had that connection so that they could live more in alignment with nature, instead of so far removed from it as our societies that we don't even realize how much damage we're causing.
I mean, I know we're both big Sharon Blackie fans, aren't we? And that's one of I've been sort of exploring more, I suppose, in the last year, is becoming more aware of how intrinsically deep the sort of trauma is almost in our society about how we've separated ourselves, and how it's traced back to just a few individuals who and our language, and how that shaped everyone's like worldview of basically humans at the pinnacle and we're separate. The fact that animals and things, it's not accepted in language that they're called he or she, they're it. And it's amazing, isn't it, how deep that is ingrained in our society and how we have lost that connection.
Another person that I read a lot that's similar to Sharon Blackie is Clarissa Pinkola Estes. Yeah. I don't know if you've heard of that book, Women Who Run with Wolves. So how our stories shape how we see things or remain afraid of those things or overcome, I think is part of finding those connections again. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but people read less. They want it all in a little soundbite or, just a nice short phrase. I'm a human being, but I'm also an animal, and I want those abilities. I remember pretending to be an animal. Do you remember? When you're little, like crawl across the floor, meow like a cat, or run through the woods like a horse, or
I always wanted to be a bird.
Do you have a favorite bird?
Probably the ravens always have a special place in my heart. I think they're quite misunderstood in society. So I suppose there's a sort of element of that, because I probably can resonate with that a little bit. I think birds have got this like amazing place in our world. They bridge the earth and the sky, sort of have a freedom that we can all be envious of.
I, like you, really love all of the corvids. Their intelligence is phenomenal, and I think that some of that is what people have a wariness about. They feel concerned if animals are as intelligent as we are. The funny thing is that a lot of times they're more intelligent and more in tune, and we have so much to gain by learning from them.
Yeah, that comes back to that sort of idea of us being above them, doesn't it? And I think certain animals, you say, like bridge that gap, like when a corvid looks at you, you're like, it's looking at you, they're seeing you and sort of reading things. And there's a degree of discomfort, isn't there?
Well, because they probably read more information about us than we are capable anymore of reading of them. I remember the first time I was up close to an elephant and my chest caught because I could feel her not just see that we were making a connection with our eyes. Woof, I'm gonna cry. But I feel that about horses. I have always had cats.
I think horses they have this way of connecting to us, don't they? And connecting us to nature as well. And it's a sort of embodied sense, isn't it? If you allow it, is so powerful. And I think they become a bit of a gateway, don't they, to like sort of crack you open a little bit, doesn't it? And then you begin to connect with sort of what in some ways are less animate objects, like sort of the trees and the flowers, which don't immediately have that sense, but actually as you open, you connect to that realm with those as well.
Well, one of the most fascinating things to me was to watch the film about mushrooms and the connection there and the information, how much like our own brain, and to recognize, though, as people were starting to have that sense about not just animal kingdom, but the plant kingdom having as much intelligence and sensitivity and communication as humans do.
You mentioned earlier about your relationship to trees. Trees have always, I need trees around me, basically. Yeah, they have this incredible energy about them. And I remember watching, similar to you, I was watching a program in this country. They put like a sort of stethoscope type device on tree, and I was like, oh my goodness, it sounds like a heartbeat. And now there's actually like more and more research being done, and they're like, they essentially do like have like the system and sort of heartbeats, and they communicate, they nurture each other. I mean, I just find it fascinating. I feel like every day is like a school day, and we're just like scratching the surface of like this amazing world that's been around us all of our lives. And I don't know, we've lost it, haven't we? We obviously, I think in history, we're probably more connected and more understanding, and as our lives have got busier and more hectic, and like you said, like no one wants to read and things, it's like we've just distanced ourselves from this, and we're like relearning it. And
when I became a mom, I really loved the education system that's Waldorf inspired, and his main concern was having so many children living in the city and having no idea where their food comes from, what it is to actually eat an animal. It's just part of the process, but it's just, it arrives, it comes from nowhere. They have no relationship with that. And so he wanted schools that put them back on the earth and back with nature and back with their creativity as an expression of that voice that, when we're looking at nature, experiencing it, we're not hearing words necessarily, but when we begin to draw pictures and feeling through the art that we do, or even choosing words that make that a conversation, I just felt like that was really an important thing. Even so, I already had this beautiful natural environment to raise my kids in, but I still wanted to keep the conversation available and alive for them, instead of shutting them in a classroom that also separated them from each other or their family or their community. For my family, I just decided homeschooling was the way, instead of did they miss certain things that are a part of society to a degree, but I also feel like it expanded their idea and their connection with their community, taking them to town and letting them experience their neighbors, and as a regular thing, and choosing their teachers, not having teachers put before them and coercing them. But
it was almost like the education was as much for you as it was for them as well. That's kind of like the sort of feeling I got was like you gained from it as much as your children did. Like it sounded like a beautiful journey that you both walked together.
I value that so deeply, and keeping up with the learning that they needed to have, I had to relearn it and maybe try and offer it in a way that still had them sure that they were capable of learning things, even if they didn't get it all in the time period that I had them. What they still needed, they could go into their community or into their environment to have. And I feel like they both have a really beautiful relationship with nature. My oldest daughter, she took a permaculture course, so she would be certified. I love that just keeps going. And we were talking about Sharon Blackie, but another person who I've been for a few years now really inspired by her is Mary Reynolds. So she was a professional gardener and did landscaping design and stuff for very affluent people. And I think there was a gardening contest or something that involved the prince, and her site was right next to his. Everyone was really moved and inspired. So it was about showing how much our native plants and our own locations have this amazing beauty in it, and seeing it and allowing it to be home, not just to us, but to all the animals that need that. So she created also We Are the Ark.
Okay, yeah.
So this is amazing. Anyone can do it. You dedicate a portion of your home, your yard, the space that you care for, to the wilderness at whatever level, even if it's just a flower pot on the porch and you let the wildflowers grow there. But at whatever part of your yard, you just let it be wild and unprotected. Then this is what makes it feel like we're doing something together, is you can put that on a map. And if you go look at the map, it has all the arcs all across the world. And so to me, this is a project for children. School, a part of their schoolyard could be,
and our inner child as well. I think as
yes.
well. Yeah. Okay, I think this is. Let's get this so that we share this properly. So We Are the Ark, and it's Mary Reynolds. And where's the best place? Has she got a website or a Facebook group, or how's the best place?
She's on Facebook. She's on Instagram. She has a website. When you go to the website, it has a place where you can, if you decided to be part of the Ark, you can put your location on there, and then you're on the map. And you can make a sign for your place in your yard that is that, and share pictures. People are often sharing pictures. I have another sweet friend in Ireland, but she has a beautiful art. She shares pictures of the herbs and tinctures and things that she makes, but it's called Woo in the Willows.
Oh wow, awesome. No, I think this is part of why I've started this podcast, is just ideas like this, basically, like the fact that everyone has the opportunity to do something, even if it feels small, like you said, just like if you've got a small garden and you can do a flower pot, if you've got a bigger garden and you can do a flower bed, or if you've got a lot of land and you can, you know, put aside an acre or a hectare or whatever. But the fact that even someone, you know, in a flat with a, you know, a window box can actually do something. And so I love the fact that you brought this up, because I think what I find that I've heard a lot of people struggle with is that who feel this, you know, love and connection with Mother Earth, and just feel this quite often like sort of anxiety and despair and overwhelm that, you know, our governments and large corporations seem to talk, and that's about as far as they ever get. And a lot of people, you know, our society has made us, you know, to believe that we're powerless, I think is probably the best sort of description of it. And actually finding these communities and hubs of people where you can connect with other people, but you can do your little bit, and actually then see on, like you said, I mean, seeing on a map, like actually, you know, how just individuals coming together can actually have quite a huge impact.
Yes, I love it because it feels more than sending money away by mail to, you know, I still love Greenpeace. I don't have a lot of money to send. And I think that that's something that makes people feel desperate, and grievous about what we can and can't do. But I think that when we love something, we have to find a way to do that. And again, no matter how small that ARC offering is, it's also whenever you are there and visiting that or caring for it, you're also sharing that enthusiasm to learn what you can do with the people that are around you. And so instead of it feeling as desperate, you feel like you're not just giving then to the wild place, but you're giving that idea to another person because you're loving it, and then they're getting to visit that with you. I learn all the time. I can't stay away from the plant store.
That's a good addiction to have, though.
And so, you know, I've gotten a little more frugal about it, but every time I go buy animal feed, I have to come home with something, and the first question is, what natives do you have? So I'm not looking for more to garden that's not necessarily sustainable here. I want to plant things that don't need so much help from me, but they will help each other, and then they'll help other things be here. You know how for a long time people have been really concerned about the honeybees because they're a pollinator and because they make sure that the food keeps growing. Well, they're acting like the honeybees are the only pollinators. We should definitely take care of the honeybees. I love honey. Like, that's my only sweet, but I love it. My dad used to care for fruit trees too when I was young, and he would bring home fresh honeycomb. And so that was like candy, you know, it was so wonderful. So when we put all of those native species of plants and flowers here, then we have a very lot of pollinating insects. So that's exciting. You can get excited about how the earth really knows how to take care of herself. And she just wants to show you how to do that too. We keep not listening. We think we know better, and we really don't. So it's always learning. And that was my favorite thing, even as a kid, to just, as a parent, that's what I wanted. And for them to not think, well, we just go to school or we just go to college and we just learn this thing and we just have this job. And I think that we have to participate in nature.
I think it's a humbleness, isn't it, as well, there, that you're sort of drawing on, of, you know, the earth and the trees and the flowers and the insects have been around for a time scale that we can't even really comprehend. And, you know, and like you say, sometimes it's just a question of us getting out of the way, you know, stopping with this sort of controlling, micromanaging, and just being like, giving the space, the time, the intention as well, because I think that's quite an important element, isn't it? And I think that comes to your group as well, of like, you know, your intention, even if you actually can't offer an ARC, but if your intention is to be there and kind of, you know, pour your energy into other people that can, that's an important element as well.
I think that part of our separation is that we became afraid of it. and we continued to teach being afraid of it, and instead of trying to, and the more we understand, so getting that bird's eye view of what's really going on, that there are not borders, and there are not, that it all works together from underneath the ground to up into the sky, and it actually cares for us, but only if we accept that it's not meant to necessarily just be easy. We're not babies. So I feel like it's a responsibility, actually. We would like people to feel that, but I don't think that they're going to feel that if we're admonishing either. It's hard not to. I feel angry for all of the harm that we do, but if we can show them how much we need that thing. My husband particularly likes reptiles, and I worked at a pet store, so we would take them around to the schools, hostel even, or whatever, and I remember one of the kids said, "But I'm afraid of it," and I said, "Well, that's fair. So I'm going to show you that it's not going to hurt you, and we'll have your teacher touch the snake first." And she kind of recoiled, like, "I have to touch the snake too." It was really sweet, but she did, and her first response was, "Oh, it's not slimy."
Yeah.
And so it seemed like the whole rest of the class relaxed, though, because she was brave and did that and learned something in that instant, that she held this one idea and it wasn't that idea. And so it's that kind of thing, that when we care about something and we know that it's lovable in its way for what it is or what it does, it has a place. You know, all the creepy things that people are afraid of are probably helping them out in some way, and they haven't just learned what that is.
I think that comes back to, again, like a sort of theme that's come through quite a few of our comments about these ideas and things that have become ingrained in our society, and like you said, things like snakes have, you know, this whole rich connotation of, you know, being quite evil and unpleasant. I was actually probably the kid that, if you'd come to my class, I would have pushed to the front and been like, I can hold the snake, because I love snakes. Yeah.
Those experiences are kind of amazing for just, you know, expanding.
Yeah, and I think that's important, isn't it? I think it's finding that balance, isn't it? I think we've come a long way, like, in our lifetime. Like you said, like, you know, obviously the understanding more about, like, the sentience of animals, and having more respect for them, and making sure if they are in captivity, that they have as much of a quality of life as possible. But there's nothing that compares to, you know, actually having that physical closeness to an animal, and how that can inspire you for your life. I mean, I've been lucky enough to obviously to live in Africa, but my early experiences were like you, in zoos and things, and the same with, like, David Attenborough programs that inspired my love, which is kind of, I come back to was it Mary Reynolds, one of her very famous quotes was, like, you know, you do the best you can until you know better, and then you do better.
I know exactly the quote you mean, though.
And I think that's important as well, is, like, there's a quest for sort of perfectionism, isn't there? And people are held up to this impossible standard, and if you've ever, you know, like, if you've been to a zoo in your life, then suddenly you can't love animals, or, you know, there's these kind of rules and regulations that people who actually want to work together, and when I say rules, they're unspoken, unwritten rules, but, like, you know, we do put all these confines around that, and I think sometimes we end up fighting amongst ourselves, when actually it's like we're all on the same page. We're all wanting to help.
What I think I understand from that is that we all have our different place of entering into what we're caring about. And some people are more newly awakened to that. Some of us have been on that sort of heading on a path from when we were very small and all along the way. Did we have it all before? No, but the more we learn, and the better that we do. And so every year it's a new choice. So when I found Mary Reynolds' arc, that was so exciting to me, because it was not like when I said I was writing the checks to Greenpeace, somebody else is doing that work or that job, and I'm just sending money to that. But I could actually now do more by eating more locally and learning about native plants. And so I'm participating with it instead of just sort of giving money to continue just to remain separate. And so whether we're talking about an arc or we're talking about self-sufficient living or working with animals and people to make those connections more personal and more intimate, and realizing how much we need them, like how much we need wolves to do the work that they do so that they create a balance and that the nature thrives more efficiently. And our interference of removing predators so that we get to be the only one. It's similar to take a nutrition standpoint. If we are only giving ourselves medicine like antibiotics and we kill the natural biome in our gut, then we are less healthy and less capable of digesting food or remaining healthy. We have a sort of a world crisis in health, and gut health is just as important to mental health as it is to your just not getting whatever thing. So what I'm saying is we need all of that diversity, whether it's in our gut or around us. And when we just pick off the things that we think we like, then we become sort of addicted to things that are very slowly killing us all.
Yeah, I like that analogy of thinking about your diet. And I mean, I'm a bit of a chocoholic. No,
I like chocolate.
But you couldn't survive on chocolate. Well, you could try. You might be happy.
You would only be happy for a little while because at some point your body's going to give way and you're not going to be able to even go get the chocolate. So I, for instance, in this location have a bunch of trees around me that I don't use the fruit that they give, and there's so much of it. So it's one of my newer goals to learn how to use it, and not just learn how to eat it, the way I see my animals or the deer who are passing through the yard eat the acorns. Or we have bay trees, so they have these bay nuts on them, and they're very small, but they're kind of like an avocado. And then the seed inside, if you roast them, it's like a stimulant, like coffee, and tastes wonderful. Wow. So I'm learning these things, and this is the way people used to survive here. So if I can do that, I don't have to import food from somewhere else, which is not healthy for our planet to constantly be importing, thinking we should all be able to eat bananas. That's not sustainable. And that's what we're learning, is that we can't all have it all.
I think that also speaks to, there's a lot of waste, isn't there? I think that's like what you're saying is like, you're in your back garden, your yard, you've got this resource available. Obviously some of it, you need to leave for the deer and the insects and things, but there's stuff there that you could utilize and make use of, and it's growing anyway. And so if you can use that, then you have less need for other resources. And that's important, isn't it? Is learning. And I think our grandparents, they were, I guess maybe sort of like the war era and things, they had to be more acutely aware of that, didn't they? And I think as society's progressed, we've, I don't want to say spoiled, because that's not quite right, is it? But like we have got a little bit spoiled, haven't we?
That we've made things too easy, so we are immature in our ability to provide those things for ourselves. And so that's, to me, what about having a self-sufficient life is realizing that I am capable of providing my own food based on what the earth is already offering, right? So it takes the money out of it. But we also, you can't take it all and then not use that. We're sharing life with lots of other things. So the illusion of that we own property, right? We have this illusion that we bought this piece of property and it's mine and I'll do what I want with it and blah, blah, blah. And then we take anything we want. We sort of rape and pillage and don't consider that there's a greater life out there that's participating. And the word spoiled is appropriate, I feel, because we're like children who just think we should have all of the chocolate, and not have to be responsible to eat what will keep us healthy. And there's another book I should mention from Robin Wall Kilmer, I think, and Braiding Sweetgrass. Yeah. Do you have that?
I'm glad you said her name, because I struggle with that too. I love that book. Yeah, it's one of my favorite books, Braiding Sweetgrass. I love that. I don't know, that kind of indigenous world view, isn't it? And again, it comes back to like reintegrating ourselves as part of nature rather than being apart from it.
That as we walk wherever we're going, we gather the little bits of food that we're going to need for the day, that we don't need to pack it. We don't need to store it. We don't need, I mean, some of it you do, squirrel away the nuts kind of thing. We can only carry as much as you can carry. You shouldn't try to have more than you need. I read just a little something recently. She was talking about invasive species, that when Europeans came to America, one of the plants that they brought was plantain. At first, they were concerned about it. It seemed to be wherever the white man put his foot, left this little plant. But what it didn't do was ever take over. It naturalized. And I loved the term, because even if we are supplanted somewhere else, as long as we aren't taking over what was there first or before, and we become a part of that community, then we are naturalizing to that community, to that environment, and not just thinking that we should take over or take away or injure anything else. I'm not talking about never injuring things. There's a part of life that is volatile, that is about destruction, about death, and having that relationship is really important. And maybe that's where our fear comes from. That also is a relationship we need to heal, our relationship to death, because it's always there. And there's a lot of stuff that we say that we should, for instance, that people shouldn't die. No, that doesn't work.
It is I think the last few years as well, that's it's been part of the battle, hasn't it? Has been this fear of death. I think you're right. It's a fear, like this, the flames of it have been fanned by the media and society very much so in the last few years. And I lost my father when I was in my early 20s. It's a hard journey to walk, to lose someone that you love, but it's the one of the certainties of life, isn't it, is death. And I think we've become quite removed from it. We're quite, in our society, in Western culture, and I think other cultures handle it much better. There is this fear of it, and it's like, it's sort of got to be shoved away at all costs, whatever it takes. And I think that's one of the things that I've found with my connection with animals and nature, is it's kind of a reverence for death, I guess. Like,
yes,
more,
no, absolutely.
Been with, even recently actually, we lost one of our little sheep just a month ago. To sit in that space with someone or something, or an animal that's dying, is a very powerful place to be. It's a hard place to be, but it's a very powerful place to be. And
and you love it all the way through.
And
you love it even after. My relationship with my father, he passed away shortly after my second daughter was born, and so she didn't get to know him very well. But one of the things we do sometimes in our cultures, we have people who are struggling, so they seem so terribly unhappy that their passing is a bit of a weight off. But what I felt in that situation was that he released the pain, but there was more of him after. So the connection that I had with him when he wasn't in pain, emotionally or whatever, stayed. And I felt like I've had more of a relationship with him that was without that pain and without that heaviness that he was. So he is able still to inspire me, and I feel like I have conversations with him in those places that we shared, like the trees. And he particularly loved the river and fishing, and he loved poetry, and those things, whenever I acknowledge them, I feel that he's still there with me. So the physicality sometimes is something that we get a little distracted by, instead of the whole, how you were talking about the trees, that they have that heartbeat. And so you can feel that. You can't explain it. There aren't necessarily words, but you feel that connection. And I feel that way about people, whether they're very close to us or not on this plane. But even we've made a connection, and we're very far away from each other, but we love something so much that we're right here. We're right here with it. So I hope that that kind of life can connect with you, that it's not just about what's right in front of our face.
Yeah, and I think so obviously I called the podcast Nurtured by Nature,
Yeah.
and I think it was I was trying to find this sort of all-encompassing, like the way that we can nurture nature, but also that nature can nurture us. And I think my connection with the trees and animals has just sort of deepened inside of me, this sort of awareness of energies, and our language is ill-equipped to really like have a lot of these conversations. We're finding a way with words that don't really embody the depths of knowledge and information that's available. And I think there is an element of, I guess it comes back to maybe like seasonality as well, and again, and trees. And we're going into fall at the moment, or autumn. And
Yeah.
I mean, I have this beautiful ancient oak tree that is in the paddock where my horses live, and is so vibrant all summer, and then like he's starting to, the leaves are changing, and there's a stillness comes on him, and a peace, and the retraction of the nutrients and things, they sort of draw inwards. And we don't do that enough in society, do we?
I was noticing this one in particular because we've been having so many very long and hot summers, and the fires are scarily, just anywhere at any minute. Where I am in California is in the northern third. So I have the redwood trees,
Oh, wow.
which is it's a rainforest.
Yeah,
So
wow, amazing.
us not having it, so it's not tropical, it's cold, but not having the rain feels very uncomfortable. It's not even just because of the fire. I can just feel that. I can see it in the trees, feel it in myself. But this year, at least a month ago, the robins started to show up in my yard, in my section that is the arc. I was like, wait a minute, that feels early to me.
Yeah.
That usually they come when the rains come back, and the worms are going, and they're fluffing through the leaves, and they're flying everywhere. A few robins showed up, and I could feel what they were coming for. So it was almost as if autumn came early. I love that if we're paying attention to the animals that are there, they'll tell us before we know what's happening. And to me, it's amazing because there's just so much more language there.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's like there's so many little things, aren't there, that all like come together.
And it's constant. It's like that heartbeat that we were talking about, when you go to the ocean, and that's almost all you can hear is what you would hear if you were in your mother's womb, because you can hear her heartbeat. So there's just this shushing of all of the blood and the fluids, but it's there at the ocean. So you're being reminded of what you're a part of. And so those signals that happen every year are so nice for us to acknowledge what time actually is, not the funny clocks or calendars that we do, but what time offers. And autumn arriving earlier might mean we might get that firewood stacked up before it's not pouring down rain when we're trying to get it in. It's important for us to pay attention to those things, and I think that we have those feelings, we just don't know how to interpret them anymore. And I think that for people like you and me, it's not that we should reach everybody and change everybody right now. It's that your love of it, shared with as many people as you can reach, will just continue to ripple out from that place. And when it's done with love, it goes faster, farther.
I think I've found like the past few years been quite lonely, and our society's been quite ruptured, hasn't it, really? I think our whole like world view and what we kind of took for granted, and not necessarily in a bad way,
right?
It's a it's a period of growth. And I mean, I'm sort of again reminded of another oak tree that a few years ago like lost this massive branch, and it was about a third of the tree, and life went on, and he's just as beautiful but different. And I think that's really what like my my intention here with this and setting up conversations with like-minded people like yourself is for other people to have this space of connection and somewhere that they can come to and feel like, oh, there are other people out there, can feel that connection and sort of like a safety and a coming home and a confidence as well, a confidence to like explore it more. And
oh, definitely, that it's really sweet. I was going to say something about the oak tree too. I have a large oak tree that we had a swing on, and an arm of that broke, and I just scooched it over into my garden and made a garden bed from this sort of snaky arm of the tree, and just let it still be part of the environment of the tree, so it gives back to itself, and I liked that. But I think that there are more and more people who are wanting more and more language and more conversation, and to see how they can make that connection, not just in something that they can do, but something that they learn how to listen to differently with themselves. It's a little bit about writing, but it's a lot about exploring your senses where you are, whatever your place is. So not just learning the natural part of that history and environment, but also the human part, the human coming in and working and doing its thing, and how that's worked for us and how it's not working for us anymore in some ways. So learning our own history sometimes can be as important as then valuing the history of the land that was there before we got there. And I like it because she has you work with just your own immediate senses, just what do you see and what do you hear. And so she's asking you to inform your place in that place, and how it's helped you, or how it's hurt you, or and change the conversation.
That brings me back to you, because you are a creative at heart, like myself. You do your lovely art and a lot more writing as well at the moment. And do you find that helps you as well? Like, that creative outlet is an important aspect of your relationship with nature, but also does it kind of help you sort of deepen into that,
well, that ties right back into Sharon Blackie or Clarissa Pinkola Estes. So all of us have some trauma, whether it's very much in our childhood or just in our life experience. We have some trauma. And for me, drawing before writing was really strong for me, but drawing pictures again is that conversation of trying to understand, even just colors have feeling, right? So the colors that are around us help us to work on that trauma in a somatic way. So there's that somatic stuff that we're trying to get back to, those primal animal movements, whether it has to do with our breath or some shaking or stretching or slowing down our breath. But drawing helps to do that, right? Writing is another way for that to happen, and connect with stimulus that's on the outside of me. If I write down what that is, then I'm listening in a way to the voice that's inside that wants to heartbeat with that, to join that. When you hug a person and your heartbeats start to sync. Right. So I'm syncing with my own heartbeat and the environment that's around me. And my dad was a writer, and he loved to read stories. And so myth is that recognition of those patterns that we have, the seasonal patterns, the animal patterns, the voices of the trees, and the voice within ourselves. And when we read a story, think of how many people read that story and identify with that as part of themselves. So myths are truths, even if they seem like they're fanciful, but they're truths to everybody, because it's about our soul journey, I feel. And so writing for me is about listening to where I am on that, whatever myth. I could probably pick any movie or any book, whether it's a kid's book or Lord of the Rings, and I can say, oh, I'm that character, or that's the part that I'm playing in that story right now. For me, writing is a way that I listen to myself, and that by what I've written, I can read where I am in the story and be assured about my place and my participation in that bigger fairy tale.
Yeah, and then that links back to your touching on trauma. And also, I mean, I think a lot of us have a huge amount of trauma around the destruction of the natural world. Using the word trauma is something that I've only really sort of deepened into in the last few years. I kind of, I used to sort of hold it a bit apart, and it was like, people who'd gone through horrific things, and read a lot about it. And it's, the small traumas, that the little ones that add up, and they add up and they add up, and they fill you up over time, and then suddenly you get to this point where you can't cope anymore. I think there's a lot of that in the people that care about the natural world, and we have a lot of anxiety and worry and fear for the future. And I think I love the fact that you were saying about, like, your writing kind of brings you back to the present as well. And that's a very important aspect of dealing with trauma, isn't it? Is getting out of that cycle of, like, sort of projecting forward and getting into the moment, and sort of embodying in where you are, which I think also relates to the lady you were talking about, who was, getting you to sort of sense into your immediate environment.
To me, we've put feelings aside too much, and that's like holding back the weather. So to me, that's what our feelings are. They're different versions of weather that we might have. And the bigger the storm, whatever it is, whether it's a firestorm or a rainstorm, it becomes too much. And we see that happening for the planet, and we can feel for it. And so there's a part of me that goes, yeah, have it out. Because I know I feel better if I've had a good cry. I feel better if, I find a safe place to do it. But if I scream, so if I'm feeling really enraged, I'll just take a ride in my car onto the freeway and scream, because I'm not going to scare anybody who can hear me. But I have at times screamed till my voice is gone, because we have all that feeling. But for our society, or for norms, we all try to be so nice, or we all step out of the way of the person who's become the storm. We don't want to be affected by that. But I think it's by not accepting all of the emotions and all of the weather and trying to protect ourselves from it is when it
builds up. It's like the hurricane, isn't it? It's like, instead of a little windstorm, you end up this sort of churning mass, and it's too much.
Well, and there are places where storms like that are normal. There is a season for the particular weather that we have, but for that part of the earth, that storm is necessary. If it doesn't have that, then we have these imbalances that create either drought or flood. So I would rather look for those balances in nature and appreciate them in the same way that I need to look for those balances in myself and appreciate those feelings as they come. And if I let those feelings happen and have reverence for what they're correcting, right? So I think the reason where humans have so much trauma is because we forgot how to let those emotions correct.
Yeah.
Right? If you are a prey animal and a predator, comes at you, you have to react. Now, you are going to hopefully react in a way that you will survive. If you do, you got to be able to shake off that situation, or you're not going to be able to move, and you definitely won't survive. So we've forgotten how to do that for ourselves. And part of that is allowing our emotions to safely be released from the situation to keep going forward, whether it's a really large trauma or all those little ones that make you more and more contained. And it's different for everybody. Writing for me just allows me to do that. It allows me to sort of pour out all those feelings in a safe place, and hopefully trying not to hurt somebody else, can go there and I can pour that out, and I can have a conversation with myself about what was that, and why is that weather, and what do I need to do, and how can I move forward. And so stories, just reading stories, helps that kind of a thing too. But it's definitely inappropriate for our own species to go around acting out our trauma instead of taking it to, how can I make this more useful and more mature?
I think as a society, we kind of think we're at the pinnacle now, and it's actually like we kind of regressed, haven't we? We need to just grow up a little bit and find that maturity again.
Yes, we should not be so pampered and catered to, and have. We also touched on ownership. We think we own something, and if we own something, we think that gives us the power to control somebody or something else, and in doing so we enslave it, or abuse is one word, but I'm more exploit. So we exploit things for our own gain, and that attitude is not just exploiting nature, but it's exploiting each other. It's exploiting certain groups of people. That exploitation that one group thinks they have over another, that they should do that, that's part of that imbalance that I think that the world in so many different ways is having to face. It's not even in your own healthy interest. When we're living in sync with Earth, we are part of the life process. When we put ourselves outside that, and that life is only for our consumption, we make ourselves a cancer. So cancer will eat its host until that host is destroyed, and therefore the cancer is destroyed. That makes no sense whatsoever. So if we are very thoughtful and very considerate, then we might like to join the life force instead of just be about consuming it to death and ourselves in the process.
Really powerful analogy, that
So I'm going to be a little cell that's going to go, I'm not going to turn into a cancer cell. I'm going to go over here and work with these other cells that are turning, that are being healthy, and let the cancer cells wear themselves out. But I'm not going to help them. And I think that that's part of what the arc is for me. It may seem like a very small place. I only live in a 2.5 acre parcel. And my goal is, as a legacy, to give it back to Earth.
You say only 2.5. I'm in the UK. 2.5 is like a kingdom. But that's the thing, isn't it? It's coming back to ourselves, coming back to what nature can help us with ourselves, to heal ourselves. That journey doesn't have to be completed. That's going to be an ongoing journey, but it's one that we need to start. And then how we can, with that awareness, I suppose, move forward and make changes in our lives and in our environment, and connect with people who have a sort of similar mindset, and what people achieve together is infinitely greater than the sum of the parts. And I think that's something to hold on to as well, is building connection and working together. There is a lot you can achieve when it feels like you're not maybe doing very much.
We can be more like the fungus and make those little connections all through, from tree to tree to tree, or body to body to body, and accept the wisdom of those animals. It isn't so much that they know, but they trust that the environment is supporting them, and that they do their part in collecting the food that they need. Unless they're out of balance, they don't take more than they need either. That's us. This may seem like an off part of a topic, but one of the issues that I have with when we're talking about business or social media, or the way the world works with money, is that we want to have a positive attitude about money, that that it can be an energy for good, but it has been such a singular source of what is abundance. And I think that one of the things that if we could see the abundance that Earth provides, that we don't have to rethink that, we just have to participate in it. and that there is less need for more money. There's just more need for working with the abundance that's already there.
Yeah.
And that to me is that connection. And you would feel that resonance of abundance in that participation, in that looking around and seeing how much there is already there. One of the things that causes us to be sad when we're looking at the destruction that we do to the earth, we're only seeing all of those places. In no way do I want to suggest that we not look. I think that more people need to look and see the size of the landfill and the size of the plastic ocean.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is it's trying to find that balance of education without like destroying someone's spirit, I suppose.
Part of the reason a landfill works is because we don't see it. And so if we saw it, we don't want the garbage in our own space, but we're willing to just put it in some other space where we don't have to see it. But if we had to see it, maybe we wouldn't create the stuff that becomes garbage, because it is possible. One of the early books that I was using with my daughters for creating a home of a farm is that a sustainable farm has no waste, because you use everything. Whether we're talking about an animal, if you're a person who eats meat, that you don't waste anything there. You have such reverence for that whole entire life that you make sure that it goes back into that life, including us. I mean, how silly is it that we put our bodies in caskets, embalmed, so that we don't break down? We're supposed to be the dirt again. Please give our own bodies back to the earth. To me, that's part of that completion. It just helps inform our choices. So instead of buying ketchup, for instance, in a plastic bottle, I'll buy it in a glass bottle. So there's little things that we can do every single day in how far away our food got. One of the groups that I used to take my daughters to was a town group for localization. So the idea is that we know what our village has in its own making, and then what do we need from the next village over, as opposed to from across the country. Right. So if we can be more sustainable even in our local districts, then we don't need to buy it in the supermarket from across the world and create this chain of manufacturing and production and transportation that is so much the problem. I try to break it down into little bite-sized stuff too, not just, because it does feel impossible to save the world. But really what we need to do is let the world save us.
Wow. I mean, I almost feel like that's the kind of perfect spot to end on, isn't it? Do you want to repeat that for us?
Talk for days, though.
We need to let the world save us. And that comes through that cyclic nature again, doesn't it, of being a part of it rather than holding ourselves apart from it. Is there anything else you think is on your heart to share?
Well, there is one more. If we, instead of seeing ourselves as a pest, a plague on the planet, what if we learned what our purpose was here? And I think that that's what we forgot. We think that the earth is here for our purpose, but we have a job. I used to really hate flies coming in the house, and they circle around in your face, and I would go crazy trying to kill it and missing and cussing and being furious. And I'm like, all right, what does a fly do that I need to be more reverent to this thing? And I don't want that job. I do not want the job that a fly does. I just don't. So I'm going to let that fly have that job. And I'm going to figure out what my job is. And so I would say this, I speak out loud in the house and tell the flies, please, just if you go to the door or the window, I'll let you out to do your job. If you stay in here and make me crazy, I'm going to squish you. You'd be surprised how many flies will sit at the door to go out.
I do the same with, like, if we have bees or things in the house. I'm like, well, thanks for the visit, but like, actually, you need to be outside. That's where like your flowers and things are, and we go this way, like it's just another foot that way, and there's the window, and yeah, they do.
Right.
It's they do respond to it. I think there is that thread of tendency in people who have reached kind of rock bottom despair about the state of the natural world to view humanity as a plague. And basically we kind of almost need to wipe ourselves off the face of the earth, and that's the only
Oh,
way that Earth's gonna stand a chance. And I like what you've just said about actually, we need to view
be more
ourselves as,
reverent to ourselves.
yeah,
And to see that question, what am I here for, and what is my purpose, to have some connection to that, to the whole of nature. So we want wholeness for ourselves when we're healing trauma or healing difficult situations. So if we look at ourselves as part of that greater whole, that we as a species have a part to play, then I think that we could turn it around and actually feel that mission comes up pretty easily.
yeah.
And I bet everyone could connect with some part of their 7-year-old self and remember exactly what that is.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. That's really, thank you so much. I think that's a wonderful place to end this conversation. And so much that's come up. I can't thank you enough. It's been beautiful talking to you.
I hope we do it again sometime.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Nurtured by Nature podcast. I truly hope this conversation has brought some hope and inspiration into your life. I would love to have these messages ripple out across the world. So if you can, please share this episode with your friends, leave a review on your favourite podcast player, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. I would love to hear from you, so please feel free to connect with me on the links provided in the podcast description. But most importantly, thank you so much for being a part of this journey with me. But don't forget to simply get out there and enjoy the natural world.